You know, no matter which company you're a fan of or not a fan of, whether you're a PlayStation fan or an Xbox fan or a Nintendo fan or whatever, I think everybody can pretty much agree that Sony has some of the absolute best developers in the world. And I say that as someone who has really only come along to kind of notice this huge quality difference between Microsoft and Xbox Studios. And really 2018 was more of a showcase of that, where we kind of got hit with God of War, Detroit Become Human, and Spider-Man back to back to back. And then on Microsoft's side, it was, I think it was State of Decay 2, Sea of Thieves, and PUBG. I mean, it doesn't get much drastically different than that, if you ask me. But at the end of the day, Sony developers speaking out about the PlayStation 5 has me very intrigued. And if anything, you should want to hear what they have to say, because I can tell you what, it's some impressive stuff, and that's who's going to showcase that console the best. What's up, everybody? Crapgamer here with Crapgamer Reviews, back with yet another video. Thank you so much for checking it out. I really do appreciate it. Please hit that like button, share it out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe or consider it. And I want to say thank you to all my new subscribers. You guys rock. To all the old subscribers, thank you so much. To anybody who just watches my videos and, you know, maybe you haven't subscribed, maybe just dipping your toes in, I appreciate you as well. Let me just say, to support a content creator, all it takes is a like. I put a lot of hard work in on this stuff, so a like does go a long way. You've probably seen some changes around here, and, you know, they're going to continue somewhat for the foreseeable future as I kind of find my way on this whole YouTube thing. Hopefully you guys are there with me on that journey. And if you hit the bell, you're notified of all that content as soon as it drops. And I try to interact with you guys as much as possible. With that being said, we know that the PlayStation 5 is an incredibly powerful console, and we also know that, hey, Microsoft has, surprise, surprise, an incredibly powerful console. What it's going to really come down to is preferences and things like that. I really do think that what we're seeing is developers are starting to show that, you know, that giddy up, if you will. They're really excited to talk about it, and I think that, you know, the time for talking is almost over, and it's almost time for actual showing, and I think that that's going to be very important going into next generation. And who better to start talking and start showing than probably one of the, if not the best developer on the planet right now, Naughty Dog, who have some absolutely incredible things when it comes to the PlayStation 5 to say, and what it means for them, and what they're going to be working on and things like that. So again, I'm finished with The Last of Us 2. Absolutely blows my mind. Of course, I'm not going to give any spoiler here or anything like that, but really an incredible piece of storytelling there. If you look at the other games that they've been able to accomplish, The Last of Us, the Uncharted franchise, obviously second to none. They've also actually did the Jak and Daxter trilogy. Absolutely phenomenal games. They did the best Crash games, including Crash Team Racing, which is one of the better team racing games. So that studio has a very long history of putting out above average games, and in most cases great games on PlayStation platforms for many years, almost pretty much since the beginning. So you have to think, hey, this team knows exactly what they're doing, and it's rumored that they're working on a new IP. They could also possibly be doing a sequel to The Last of Us Part 2. You know, obviously the sales numbers and things like that are absolutely insane for that. But at the end of the day, they're talking about the PlayStation 5 and what that means. And I think that that's something that, you know, most of us can kind of like to hear. And this is something that we really enjoy. And I think this is something that many of us kind of expected to hear as well. So according to this anyway, the PlayStation 5 in particular, of course, surprise, surprise, the solid-state drive is going to help developers break free of the many constraints that they've been under, especially at the tail end of a console generation. Let's face it, they're old hardware. There's a reason why the PS4 and PS4 Pro make a lot of noise when you're playing The Last of Us 2. It's old hardware. There's no way that that stuff should be supported with the newer stuff in the next generation. So it allows for games to actually look better on the consoles, increasing you know, size of games to fit in all the results of the corners and things like that. You got to cut and make cuts, and there's constraints and all this kind of stuff. Naughty Dog says PlayStation 5 games will be facing a bit of a double-edged sword. A new generation means new technology that has to be developed to keep games moving forward graphically and from a technological standpoint. And I really liked what he said here. You know, and I will quote this, and of course I'm going to put this this little bit of an interview in the description. I'll link it so you guys can check it out. And if you guys are new to my channel, if it's a news piece, I will source it in the description always. If it's an opinion piece, I don't need to source that as it is an opinion. And if it's something like a rumor or a leak or something like that, sometimes there's a source that I can post, and sometimes if it's something that somebody just told me and I can't reveal that, then it's just kind of, you got to take it with a grain of salt, and I always say that at the beginning of a video as well. So but this is official, so this is really cool stuff to hear. Obviously, he was actually Neil Druckmann, the head of Naughty Dog, was talking on Reggie Fils-Aimé's new podcast, and he touched base on the upcoming PlayStation 5 and exactly what it means. And he said this, and I quote, at the end of a console generation, you always feel the constraints. You always feel like you're pushing against a bunch of walls and finding the little cracks where you can and take things a little further, whether it's memory or CPU or hard drive speed. When you start a new generation, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have to build a new tech for new hardware, and that can be an uphill battle. But on the other hand, all of a sudden you feel this freedom of, oh my god, we can breathe again, we can break away from these constraints. And one of the things that we're excited by is the solid-state drive and what it means for almost seamless loading. We do so much work on our end. Once you start the adventure, you never see a load screen. And there's so much work that happens behind the scenes of how we design the levels, how we chop them up. It's all invisible to the player. You never see any of that work. But now, knowing that we're going to be able to load things more quickly, it just means the designers don't have to be as constrained to how they lay things out, how we think about things when we load new characters. So I'm excited to see the doors it opens for us. He also indicated that the team wouldn't be diving headfirst into PlayStation 5, with the team taking a well-earned break following completion of The Last of Us 2, which is really good because a lot of people were worried about, burnout and things like that from the fact that this team crunches a lot. But again, you can't really argue with how great their games are and crunching towards the end of a thing. I would imagine that as anti-crunch as Microsoft even is, that 343 and all those studios and developers involved with putting out Halo Infinite are crunching and crunching and crunching to get Halo Infinite ready for launch in November. I can almost guarantee you that right now. That's just part of the game. That's what you have to do, and that's probably why, they're taking a little bit of an extended break afterwards or whatever. But I found this to be pretty impressive that when he was talking about it, that, they're not going to have load screens and things like that on their next generation, which is something that, we always felt was, kind of takes you out of the immersion a little bit. So the fact that they're talking about, hey, our next games, we won't have these constraints. We'll be able to do this. We won't have to be constrained by the CPU. Look, it's just a fact of nature. As time goes on, these hardware, these old consoles, they don't run as good, right? Like, let's just be real. I've been very adamant about this. I always felt like it was maybe a little bit more anti-consumer, that the fact that Microsoft wasn't giving you new games that couldn't be done on the old hardware, whereas a lot of people tried to play it as Microsoft was being consumer friendly and it was Sony that was being anti-consumer. I disagreed with that wholeheartedly, because I felt like if you're spending $500-$600 on a new console, you should have games that really show it off that can't be done on the old stuff. If it can be done on the old stuff, what's the point of even upgrading? And that's always been kind of my point, and I think that Sony gets that and Sony understands that. That's why their games are like PlayStation 5 at launch, and Microsoft is like, okay, well, we're going to still allow you to play on a 2013 launch Xbox One with Kinect. I think that's a huge difference. And that was underpowered severely at launch, 7+ years ago, right? So people have to keep that in mind. Listen, I'm not a fool when it comes to some of this stuff. I'm playing The Last of Us 2, and it makes loud noises come from the PlayStation 4 Pro. It just happens, right? It's an old piece of hardware. Even the Pros came out in 2016. That's 4 years old. That's ancient, right? So no wonder I don't want, old hardware to hold back the new stuff, but I think that really defeats the purpose of upgrading to the new stuff. So, maybe you guys agree with me, maybe you don't, I don't really know, but as far as I can tell, it looks like we're getting some of these tremendous experiences into next gen right away with Sony, and I love that. I love the fact that developers are taking huge and full advantage of what the PlayStation 5 has to offer pretty much right away. I do feel like, I bet if you were to get, some of Microsoft's first party in a place alone, and they didn't know they were being recorded, they would love to be doing next-gen only stuff, right? Like taking full advantage of that hardware, because let's be honest, that Series X is an absolute beast of a console, and for that thing to not be fully utilized at launch is really, really heartbreaking to see. I'm sure like Halo Infinite will look great, but the fact that, you got to do co-op with somebody on a 2013 launch Xbox One or whatever, I think that really can hamper, what it's going to be able to do. And we've seen this more and more. I mean, look at the next-gen NBA 2K game. The PC version PC players get the old version. because, you know, not everybody would have been able to play the new version on their PCs. So that whole scalability stuff kind of gets tossed out of the window yet again. You know, again, I take the developers' words for it over, you know, armchair developers or wannabe developers, or, you know, people that haven't worked on a console before. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, those are the people whose word I take for it, and I think that you know, we'd all be kind of smart to do so, you know, in the future. For me personally, that's how I look at it anyway. So I would love your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. Do you guys really think the game-changing aspects of next generation should only be accomplished on the next generation, or do you think that you like Microsoft's way better? Personally, I love Sony's approach to this. I just think it's much more well-rounded at the end of the day, but it's just an opinion. I want you all to please stay safe, happy, and healthy. Thank you all so much for joining me and taking time out of your day to watch one of my videos. Stay safe. Once again, thank you so much. Rack 'em up and game on. Crapgamer out.
Unscripted.